Alright, this is part 2 of my first episode of reacting to your Bayverse hot takes, or just Transformers hot takes in general. Of course, Bayverse is my specialty. Just to give a quick rundown, this is where I react to your apparent hot takes, kind of give my opinion on them and whatnot. This is basically the last half of the YouTube comments I got with hot takes, so they're all going to be from that first post that I made about the hot takes. And going to where we left off, the first one says, "It's good in the parts where it's good." I wouldn't really call that a hot take if I'm being completely honest, because I feel like for the most part anyone could agree that it's good where it's good. You know, stuff like the CGI, the score by Steve Jablonsky, stuff like that. After that there is, "The first three are amazing and don't get enough credit, especially Revenge of the Fallen." That's one of those where it kind of falls in the middle for me. I'd call that a slightly warm take if I'm being honest. And I say that just because I see a lot more people defending at least the first three Bay movies a lot. So saying that the first three are good, great, or in this case amazing, I wouldn't say is too unpopular. Now, Revenge of the Fallen not getting enough credit, I'd still call that a slightly hot take at the very least. It's definitely liked more now than it probably was back in 2009 just because of all of the negativity and very harsh reviews and whatnot. But hey, this is one that I would definitely agree with. This next one has two takes. The first being, "All Bayverse movies have fantastic scores, but Revenge of the Fallen has the best overall score out of all five." To be honest, that's hard for me to figure out if that really is a hot take. The Bayverse having fantastic scores, no offense, but definitely not. That, along with like the CGI, is the most agreed upon thing that's good or even great in all of the movies. But Revenge of the Fallen being the best score, that's maybe a bit of a hot take. I tend to see people usually prefer Dark of the Moon or the first movie. Really any of the four. I tend to see the other four movies brought up with their score more than Revenge of the Fallen. I haven't really thought about it. I have to listen to all the scores again to really figure out which one I would say is the best. But I do think there is an argument for Revenge of the Fallen. There's some great tracks. The next one is, "The forest battle is still the best fight in the live action movies." Again, I'm going to be completely honest here. That's a frigid cold take. Just about anybody would agree with you. I know there's people that might pick out something from Dark of the Moon or whatever, but the forest battle, that tends to be a very popular opinion that it's the best fight or action scene in the Bay movies. And like what I said about some takes in the last video, please don't take this as me being mean. There's nothing wrong with something being more of a cold take than a hot one, but I would definitely say that is more of a cold take here. We got another one from Jay Ross, who previously said, this was in the last video, that Megatron's 2007 design was the best. He says here, "For the other hot take, I think the 2007 Decepticons are the best." I would say this is a warm take leaning cold, because the 2007 Decepticons are very popular, and I tend to see people like them more, especially since people tend to say that they were stronger, more intimidating, powerful, blah blah blah. And of course, this is one I would agree with. I love the Decepticon cast in the other movies, especially in getting more of your standard kind of Decepticons like Shockwave, Soundwave, and all that. But something about that first group, they're just awesome. They work well together. They seem very unified. I like the 2007 Decepticon cast a lot. Next up, "All the designs in the Bayverse are infinitely better than the G1 designs. Bayverse designs look more realistic, detailed, and alien-like, as they should be." I would say that's a hot take, and it's one that I agree with. I love the Bayverse designs. I love the realistic look. I love how hyper detailed they are. The fact that they really do come across as like living machines. I mean, they're not machines, they are beings, but still living machines, and just being very alien-like. As I continue to say, I like my giant alien robots to look like alien robots. Now, that doesn't mean I have an issue with the G1 design style or animated, Prime, Armada, you know, anything that's kind of more along the lines of your more standard design, I guess you could say. But I just prefer the Bay stuff. Next up is, "Revenge of the Fallen is my favorite of the three. Watching it as a kid, seeing the loss after Prime died, with the Decepticons invading and Sam and hiding, I'd never experienced that in the film, so I was on the edge of my seat the entire time." I could definitely see this being a bit of a hot take, although Revenge of the Fallen is also my favorite of at least the first three. Well, it's still my favorite overall too. And I could see how the stuff in that movie could affect you. Prime dying is fairly intense. Just kind of how down everything is with the Decepticons invading and going after Sam. Like, I can definitely see you being on the edge of your seat, especially if you're a kid. Next up, I think Stinger is a good concept. I'm not really sure where to say if this is a really good hot take or not, so I'm gonna say it's warm. Although I'm not really sure who would disagree that Stinger is a good concept or not. I think he is kind of a nemesis Bumblebee, I guess you could say. I kind of dig Bumblebee having an arch rival named Stinger. I do think the name Stinger is pretty good for an anti-Bumblebee. Just something about that name, Stinger. Next up, Age of Extinction is the second best Bayverse movie. A bit of a hot take since a lot of people tend to put the first three movies over the last two. It's hard for me to really say. I would have to watch all the movies movies back to back and really think about it and rank them, but I wouldn't really disagree with it being the second best. I do think Age of Extinction is very underrated. Next up, we have two here. The first one is, I like how the Decepticons looked in the films, and you know what? I would say this is a bit of a hot take, because a lot of people do tend to complain about the Decepticons, saying they just look like a bunch of knives or scrap metal, and you know, they're too alien-like and insect-like and this and that. But again, this is an opinion I agree with, because I love the way the Decepticons look in the movies. Then the second one is, Bayverse Optimus, especially by adding up all his losses, is unironically the strongest version of Optimus Prime. I'm gonna say this one's a hot take, if for no other reason than if you really want to go into all of the versions of Optimus Prime. You got some from the various Japanese media that are just kind of ridiculously strong, like for example, Alternity. The Alternity versions of Transformers are definitely the most powerful, I would say. But I tend to kind of leave them out because they're so ridiculous compared to everyone else that it's kind of unfair. Ignoring that though, and kind of just going with your usual G1, Unicron Trilogy, Prime, animated, blah blah blah, I would probably agree. If I had an option to have a fictional character defend me in any sort of situation, I would go with Bayverse Prime every time. He kicks a lot of ass, he does what he needs to, and yeah, he's just really awesome overall. This next one here is a long one. This is less of a hot take and more of an objective fact that the community cannot accept. Q is a more faithful Wheeljack than the Rise of the Beast one. Like, Q has the voice and is always making punk-ass inventions to save the day. Sure, he looks like Albert Einstein, but at least that reflects his role as the mad scientist of the Autobots. He even has a bunch of gadgets hanging off of his back. Meanwhile, Rise of the Beast Wheeljack is a bumbling idiot who didn't invent a single thing. His Jaleel White high school nerd appearance doesn't help either. That really cracked me up. I 100% agree with you, and I do think it is a bit of a hot take because people tend to disregard Q for looking the way that he does, and some people take him being called Q as like, oh, that's not Wheeljack. I mean, hell, he's even called Q/Wheeljack in the credits. For me, even though I will call him Q for the most part, he is a Wheeljack to me. I definitely agree with you. I think for almost every version of the past decade, at least starting in 2010 or so a little over a decade, I think he is the most faithful version of a Wheeljack. The only thing that you could really be missing is the look. And you know, obviously this being the Bayverse, I don't mind the different look. I think one neat way to maybe have done it would be to have the hair on the sides of his head glow. I mean, they're already blue. You could have just had them kind of glow when he speaks. Would have looked a little weird, but I think it would have been a fun way to do that. Next up here, we have Transformers Prime and the Cybertron duology games as greater than Bayverse and G1. I'd say this is both a hot and cold take because I'm sure most people would say that they are better or greater than the Bayverse, but I'm sure some people out there would object to them being better than G1. So overall, I'll say this is warm but leaning hot. This is also one where I wouldn't really disagree. Like, I do think they are better than G1, but I'm not sure they're better than the movies, at least for me personally. Next one here, Bayverse greater than 86. I actually couldn't get through the 86 movie, and this is actually kind of a scorching hot take, and you know what? I 100% agree. I honestly believe that the 86 movie as a film, as a movie, is the worst Transformers movie. I even think that just as a coherent story, even The Last Knight is better than the 86 movie. So yeah, I definitely agree with this. Next up, I like Bayverse Optimus more than the original one. I would say this is a warm leaning to hot take. A lot of people love G1 and everything, but this is one I would definitely agree with. Not that G1's bad, I just prefer Bayverse Optimus. Ooh, this one's definitely a hot take, I would say. 07 is the most boring of the first three movies. I'm still gonna say it's a hot take, but I have heard that as a complaint before, that the first hour or so of the first movie can kind of drag and be a little boring. I wouldn't agree with that because I'm fairly engaged with the human stuff, even if I am waiting on more Transformer stuff. So yeah, I don't really agree, but I would definitely say this is a hot take to some extent. After that, we have Transformers 2007, Revenge of the Fallen, and Dark of the Moon are peak Transformers movies and Bayverse at its best and finest. 4, 5, Bumblebee, and Rise of the Beasts are just high-budgeted fan films. Ooh, overall, definitely a hot take. I do agree that the first three are peak Transformers movies and it is the Bayverse at its best, but you know, calling the other 4 movies high-budgeted fan films, I don't really agree with. Again, Age of Extinction is very solid on its own. I guess you could maybe say that about The Last Knight with just how convoluted and everything that it is. Bumblebee, definitely not. I mean, I guess I can maybe see it because of its kind of basic story, but it's too well done of a movie, I would say. Rise of the Beast, you know, I could maybe see an argument there as well, but even then, though most of it is is basic, it is competently made, I would say. So I don't agree with the last bit. I would say that is definitely the hot take portion of this entire thing. Next up, Megatron is the most powerful and underrated villain in the Bayverse universe. So I would say this is half hot, half cold. Overall, I'll say warm, leaning cold. Calling Megatron the most powerful, I disagree with. To me, that will always be the Fallen. I know he didn't have a great fight on screen, but again, just kind of from what we're told, what he's supposed to be and whatnot, he is the most powerful, especially since only a Prime can defeat him. I do agree he is a very underrated villain in the Bayverse. I do love Bayverse Megatron. I think he's a fantastic villain in the first movie, despite him being fairly simple, fairly basic. Then it says, the Bayverse universe deserves so much better than just hating on it. I definitely agree, and I would say that is kind of a hot take with how a lot of people love to hate on the Bayverse movies like it's a personality. Hello, Nova Burnhill on TFW 2005. I do agree it deserves a lot more than just rabid hate that it gets a lot of the time. I do think it is genuinely better than it gets credit for. Next up, this person says, well, you've already gone heavily in depth on how Optimus was right every time, so I'll share that the 2007 movie is my favorite film of all time. Even within the Transformers fanbase, that's a sacrilegious opinion, and don't even get me started on film buffs who hate these movies. So it's kind of hard for me to call that really a hot take, just because, I mean, if it's your favorite film, there's nothing wrong with that. You know, I don't really think you can really judge that kind of stuff. I find it hard for someone to really tell you, no, you can't have that as your favorite film. That's dumb. Like, I guess they could, but like, I wouldn't argue against you. Although I will say, within the Transformers fan base, that's definitely a sacrilegious opinion. I mean, more and more people love the 2007 movie and come out to defend it, but people freaking love to just jerk off the 86 movie. And even though I love it, Transformers 1, I feel like is gonna start hitting that soon, where I feel like people might start overpraising it, even if it is great. And yeah, I definitely know some film buffs out there who like to be those guys. You're like, yeah, I hate this Michael Bay trash. Okay, cool, man. Glad you have such a controversial and edgy opinion. Next up, there are two here. First one is, Age of Extinction is the best part of the Bayverse. And I would say that is a hot take, and it's one that, again, I feel like an argument could be made, man. I like Age of Extinction. And then the next one is, Optimus Prime from the Bayverse universe is the best version of Optimus Prime that ever existed. I agree with this, because I love Bayverse Optimus, obviously with my Defense of Bay Prime video. But I would say this is a hot take, because even for some people out there that like Bayverse Prime, they prefer other versions. Like, it always kind of gets me how popular the Prime version seems to be now, when I remember people did not really like him when that show was airing originally. I thought he was boring and didn't have much character to him besides just being stoic all the time. But hey, that's a discussion for another time. Next up, this one also has two. Josh Duhamel. Lennox should have been the protagonist in the sequels. I agree. I would have liked to see Lennox. I think, especially with the Age of Extinction story, he could have had a pretty cool thing going on there. And of course, I just like Lennox in general, so I would definitely have liked to see this, even though I don't mind Cade, but Lennox would have been cool. And then the next one is, Age of Extinction is actually good. To an extent, it's hot. I would at least say it's warm. Yeah, I agree. I've said it several times already, but love Age of Extinction. Next up, here we go again. Age of Extinction is genuinely a decent movie, and while The Last Night does suck in almost all aspects, it's a very funny movie. So I would say that these are hot takes to an extent. With Age of Extinction, you know, again, I agree. It is a genuinely decent movie. I would even go far as to say that it is actually good. Age of Extinction is underrated, you guys. I definitely agree with The Last Night being very funny. Whether it's intentional or not, it's a pretty damn funny movie. Next up, we got two here. The first one is, The Last Night had an amazing Megatron design and great Decepticon designs, counting Onslaught too, but in a bad film. I would say that's a bit of a cold take, just because a lot of people really like Last Night Megatron. At least that part. I'm not sure how people feel about the Decepticon designs, because as far as I know, like, Mohawk is liked well enough, but isn't exactly loved. And aside from him and Barricade, and obviously Megatron, everyone else is just model reuses of some sort. I like the Last Night Megatron well enough, but I wouldn't call it amazing. And I do like some of the other Decepticon designs, even if they are reuses. Like, I do like Onslaught, even though, damn, how many times did they reuse the long haul design? And of course, good stuff being in a bad movie, because I see that a good bit, that like The Last Night Megatron is one of the few good things from a bad movie like that. So I would say that's probably on the colder side. And then they say, also, another hot take, Prime should have kept his evasion mode truck, but with the red and blue. And I would say that one's warm, because I have seen some people say that the evasion mode should have lasted longer. I wouldn't have minded seeing it stick around. It wouldn't have been a bad idea. I've always been of the opinion that Optimus should have gotten the night design, design when he got the sword from the Knights Temenos. Whether he kept the evasion mode until then, or, my preference, when he scans the Western Star, he has something that's a bit of an in-between between the evasion mode / movie 1 through 3 design and then the full-on knight design. What he got in the movie with changing the arms and whatnot is cool, but I think there maybe should have been a bit more of a drastic visual change, I guess. So next up, not gonna lie, my hot take is that Revenge of the Fallen Soundwave Deluxe 2009 figure is way better than the Studio Series one, and that it was such a downgrade. Again, this is no insult, this is probably one of the coldest takes on here, because I feel like just about anybody you ask would say that the original Deluxe Soundwave from Revenge of the Fallen is way better than the Studio Series one. I like the Studio Series Revenge of the Fallen Soundwave, but he's very flawed, especially in the satellite mode. Unironically though, I do feel like the robot mode is pretty damn good, just it sucks because you don't see that in the movie, he's just the satellite form. So they did kind of mess up on there, even if I guess it's passable, but definitely not as good as the 09 Deluxe's satellite mode. Next up, I'm not sure if this is 2 or just 1, but first part says, Michael Bay's Transformers opened the door for the 2000s kid to explore more Transformers media. I would say this is warm, leaning cold, if for no other reason than some people just don't want to give the Michael Bay movies enough credit, because I do think most people would agree with this, that the movies brought Transformers way more popularity, like probably the most popularity it had seen since the 80s, if not maybe even more so. So it definitely got people to look into the franchise more. Then the next part, while Travis Knight's Bumblebee was respectful to the source material, his movie made everyone blinded by nostalgia, stubborn, obnoxious, and closed-minded, refusing to evolve. And this is definitely a hot take, I would say, given to how some people reacted to Bumblebee, and especially that overrated as fuck Cybertron scene. Yeah, so many people are like, oh my god, the movie's so good, Cybertron, blah blah blah, first 10 minutes. I'm always like, guys, first of all, the scene's only like 3 minutes. Stop. And it's like, that's not what made that movie good. I honestly can't take anyone seriously who praises the Bumblebee movie just because of the Cybertron scene. I get it, it's cool. I think it's cool, but like, god. So I would say that one's definitely a hot take, but I agree with everything you said there. Next up, we have Age of Extinction has the best narrative and Autobot group in terms of dynamic. I would say this one's a bit of a hot take too, although again, to a certain extent, I kind of agree. Now, at least on the narrative side, I do think Age of Extinction might have the best one. It has a really solid foundation for a story. I mean, it definitely has its issue, but like, I think it sticks the landing on everything fairly well. The only stuff it doesn't were things that were meant to be set up, like say the creators. And then the Autobot group, in terms of dynamics, I can definitely see why someone would say this. I may not necessarily agree, because I do think their dynamic is mostly just like, hey, we're all kind of a bunch of dicks, but they all do play off of each other well. Next up, Bayverse Starscream's design was peak. People call him a Dorito, but he actually looks powerful and feels like a threat. Definitely my favorite Starscream design overall. So I would definitely call this one a hot take, because again, Bayverse Starscream design can be kind of iffy with some people, but I agree that he does look powerful and does feel like a threat. I mean, look at that scene where he's taking out the F-22s. Hell, look at all of his screen time in the first movie. I think he even looks powerful and sounds it whenever he responds to Megatron at the Hoover Dam. You know, I really do feel like he kind of has that like, don't give me any shit right now kind of vibe. I don't know. And this one is also my favorite Starscream design. I love this one. This one says The Last Knight is better than Age of Extinction. I would definitely say that's a hot take, and quite simply, I would disagree. I definitely think Age of Extinction is a better movie than The Last Knight. Next up, hey, it's Austin. Sam and Bumblebee's relationship is toxic as hell and isn't as good as Bay fans remember. And then the parentheses, ... guilty. Yeah, this is a hot take, and it's one that I agree with, and I know that, Austin, you and I have talked about this before. I like Sam and Bumblebee, I like the idea of them, but when you really kind of break down some of their stuff in the movies, like, especially in Revenge of the Fallen, Sam's just kind of a dick to Bumblebee. It's pretty good in the first movie, although I would say everything is a lot more implied than anything, because I feel like they only get a limited amount of time of being like, oh look, they're best friends. I'm not sure if I'd go super far as to say it's toxic, although for Revenge of the Fallen specifically, probably. Overall, I definitely agree with this, and it's definitely a hot take with how a lot of people, dare I say, romanticize their relationship. They're like, look how great they are. I mean, if I'm being completely honest, Charlie and Bumblebee were way better together. Alrighty, and the next says The Last Knight is overhated, but still not very good. And you know, I'm gonna call this one a warm take, because I'm sure some people would disagree that it's overhated, but I feel like there are those out there that would agree with that, like me, but would also agree with that it's still not very good, like me. Then next up, Bayverse Starscream is probably the most menacing version there is. Starscream was one of the main reasons the 2007 Autobots were literally struggling mad hard before Optimus showed up. He crippled Bumblebee and was winning against against a 2v1 with Ratchet and Ironhide. It's hard for me to say if this is a hot take or not, because I feel like you're just spitting facts here. I agree with everything. Starscream was a freaking menace in the 2007 movie, and I love it. Next up, this one says, Hound greater than Ironhide, but not by much. I'd say that's a warm take, because I know a lot of people love Hound, but people freaking love Ironhide, man, and his death was traumatic for some. I would disagree. I definitely prefer Ironhide over Hound, even though I do still like Hound. Next up, we have, I hope my comments made it to your hot takes video. Yes, it did, even if it's part 2. And it says, Michael Bay didn't ruin the Transformers franchise. The annoying gatekeepers and purists are the ones who ruined everything. Michael Bay's Transformers movies may not be great, but at least they opened the door for newcomers while the gatekeepers just pushed us out and told us to screw ourselves. I would say this is a hot take with how popular it seems to be to say that Michael Bay ruined everything, even though he really didn't. And honestly, the people who say that are dumb. I agree with everything else. The gatekeepers and whatnot love trying to push the people that became fans thanks to the movies out, and even just people that like the movies, because they can't accept that people could like just garbage or whatever they like to say. A hot take, but I would 100% agree with you. This one says, comparing between animation and live action is wrong. Future live action Transformers movies should be like how Mr. Chen showed it in his stop motion videos. So I don't really mind comparisons, but I think people need to keep things within context, if that makes sense. I have not seen these Mr. Chen stop motion videos. Maybe I should have double checked this and then watched this beforehand. So it's kind of hard for me to gauge there. So I'm going to classify this as a warm take. And last one here, hot take. Bumblebee 2018 is overrated. I still like it, but people treat it like it's better than the entire Bayverse. So I would say this is a hot take, because I do know, obviously like this person says here, that people do think it's better than the Bayverse. And I do think that Bumblebee is kind of overrated. I used to love it, and overall I do still love it, but it's definitely overrated, especially because, once again, that damn Cybertron scene. And that's it for this first round of hot takes. I want to thank everyone who provided them. I've had a ton of fun with this, and the response to part 1 was awesome, and I look forward to doing more of this in the future. Before we go, I have a special announcement to make. As some of you may know, I have merchandise on Bonfire. It's all just shirts at the moment, but I have a new shirt going out, which is a shirt that kind of go along with my In Defense of Michael Bay's Optimus Prime thing, and it's the Bay Prime Did Nothing Wrong. It's simple, but I like it, and I thought that some of you might as well. And I want to give a big thanks to Optimus Prime for the help that he provided with this. You're awesome, man. Thank you. And before we go, I want to thank my members on Patreon. In my average bird tier, there is Oh Hey, Optimus Prime, and Doomwave. And in my Bird of Prey tier, there is Austin Gillis. The channel support is really appreciated, you guys. Thank you. And as always, I want to give a big thanks to everyone for watching, and have a good one.